and welcome to the Chatham Select Board July 27th Select Board meeting. And welcome to all of you. And a number of our public are here with us today. It's nice seeing you again. This meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please let me know. Pursuant to Governor Baker's June 16, 2021 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. That's General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until April 1st, 2022. This meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted both in person and via remote public participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. Conference ID is 134208-476#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. And let me remind everyone out there, either on Teams or on your phone, please mute your phones and shut off your cameras until recognized, please. All right. First thing we're going to do is let me poll the board, see if we have a quorum. Select board member.
Me? Davis? Okay, present. It's
Select
okay.
board member Metters.
Present.
Select board member Nicastro.
Present.
And the chair is present. Let me give you a quick overview, especially for the people that are here now, on what we're going to do. The first thing we normally do is our minutes, and we'll go through that. Then we have public announcements and agenda item requests. That's nothing that's debatable. It's asking for a public announcement or for an agenda item, just as it says. We'll then go into new business, and the first thing up is the coronavirus update, and public comment will be allowed during that period of time. I do have a change in the agenda item, which is the section under business agenda item, board discussion items only. Number 3, drinking water testing and pumping update should have been public announcements, and I'll take that responsibility, just like it was the time before and the time before that. So, pardon? Public comment. Yeah, we'll be able to have public comments during that period of time. After the coronavirus, we have public comments on our business agenda items. And those are, the first one is a special one-day alcohol permit. The next one is the parade, awards, and Independence Day. The third, again, is drinking water, but you can speak during that period, during that agenda item. Then comes up the bike path easements between the town and Bailey's Path, a draft incentive historic preservation bylaw, and then an update on our Comcast license renewal, and we'll end up with committee appointments. So, first thing on the agenda are our minutes, and can I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved. Move approval.
Second.
Any comments? No? If none, I'll have a vote to approve the minutes. Shereen?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Okay. Easy this time.
Can we just make a note that Select Board Member Dykens is not present tonight?
Sure, okay. Yeah, Select Dykens is not present today. Okay, next is public announcements and our agenda item requests. Do we have any from the folks in the audience? Okay. Just we'll take one up. Please make sure you give your name and where you're from. We'll do one at a time. Okay, you okay? Super. And then Gloria, you wanted to go up after that too? Okay, that's fine.
Hi, nice to
Okay.
see everybody. It's Carol Bliss. I was shut off from speaking at the Airport Commission meeting. I was completely shut off. So I'd like to request now an agenda item where the AC is held accountable to the public for definitively specifying what fake news and misinformation is being disseminated instead of using generalizations and bullying the public while in the process of doing that. Way more than a handful of residents want to know the answers to our questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Gordon from South Chatham, and I too would like to request an agenda item for the next Select Board meeting. My request is for the Select Board to address specific items which the Airport Commission believes are inaccurate, facts that are presented by a large and diverse group of Chatham citizens.
That's the same as the one
it's
prior?
same.
prior?
Yes,
We could
we
do it once.
really want that request.
Okay, thank you.
We want to know what, what's happening.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gloria Freeman. First, thank you for putting a drinking water testing and pumping update on all future agendas. And I think you said you'll continue to allow the public to ask questions contemporaneously with these reports. I also have an agenda request that the study that you have initiated to determine the cause of PFAS contamination not be limited to wells 4, 5, and 8, as Dr. Duncanson had stated to the Board of Health at their meeting last week, and that you have an agenda item to discuss the scope of your study. While this area importantly includes the airport and Commerce Park, I would encourage you to include all potential sources of water contamination within the entire Water Resource Protection District. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. I forgot to ask the board if they'd have any. You have one? I have one also. So. If everyone else will wait. Do we have any more from the audience first, just in case? Okay. Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, not time sensitive or anything, but while it's on my mind, for possibly the fall, I'd like to just have a board discussion on an overview of the way we do interviews and some elements concerning interviews. Examples, if someone's interviewing for one committee, to make sure we're clear that if there's multiple interests in multiple committees, how we handle that. If someone interviewed within a certain time period, do we want to re-interview them in a certain, within a 6-month window if they were to consider being on another opening, little things like that. So
Okay.
there may be changes, there may be some, but I would think that would be the benefit of the board just to kind of
Good point.
overview. Thank you.
Shireen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've had a few emails from citizens concerned about noise complaints in the town, and I thought it might be prudent for us to look at our noise bylaw and see where it might be, see if it's still effective and what possible issues we need to address within that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I have one also. This has to do with Cape Light Compact contractors. Cape Light Compact main contractor or their engineering contractor is Rise Engineering. They are looking to hire and get assistance to complete installation on a number of projects. A number of things in energy efficiency were put off for a while. They now have a backlog, and for our local guys here, they're looking for electricians. They need them immediately. And the second part are HVAC, and that's their next priority. So if there's anyone out there that's interested in it, the person to talk to is Amanda Aceta, and she's at Rise Engineering. It's AACETTA at riseengineering.com. And if anybody didn't get that, just give me a call. Okay. Anyone online on Teams that has a request? Okay. Our first business agenda item is coronavirus update from Dr. Duncanson. Welcome, Dr. Bob. I saw you on there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is our first coronavirus update in about a month and a half, or almost 2 months. When we last met, things were looking really good. Unfortunately, the news today is not as great. Let me share my screen here, kind of show you where we are now at. So the first figure that I have up, hopefully everybody can see it.
Yes.
Okay. The first screen that I have up, this is our confirmed cases in Chatham since the beginning of the pandemic, really in March of 2020. You see the spike we had in December of last year and then the beginning of this year. And then our case counts dropped off fairly dramatically once we got into the May, June timeframe. We had 21 cases in May of this year. We went down to 2 cases in June, and we thought things were going really good. Well, we are now back up to 7 cases as of yesterday afternoon. So as of the 26th of July, we are back up to 7 cases, which is where we were in May of this year. The quick response is, oh, it's related to the outbreak in Provincetown. I can tell you of the 7 cases that we have had so far in Chatham, none of them appear to be related to the Provincetown outbreak. That's a question now that VNA and the Community Tracing Collaborative are asking folks when they contact them, and nobody that's been in our 7 cases so far this month have indicated any relationship to the Provincetown outbreak. For 6 of those people, I can tell you that they are people that have been previously vaccinated, so they would be considered breakthrough cases, which is not, as everybody's been talking about, not unexpected, not unusual. We may be seeing a few more breakthrough cases than we originally anticipated, but that just goes to show how the Delta variant, which has been identified as the prominent driver in the Provincetown outbreak and also the prominent driver in about 80 to 85% of the cases in the United States right now, is so highly transmissible. And so it's something, unfortunately, I think we're going to be dealing with for a little bit of time here. The next thing that I just wanted to show you is our average daily incident rate, which you've also seen before. And again, it's obvious that, when we were back in that early June timeframe, that we were pretty well down there at 0. But now we are seeing over the last couple of weeks in July, we are starting to see an uptick in that, which is consistent with what we're seeing across Barnstable County. And in Massachusetts and in other places in the United States. Vaccine-wise, we are doing really well. As you can see here, I've got the graph as of the 20th of July, which is last Tuesday. The state puts this information out on a weekly basis on Thursday as of the previous Tuesday. So a new one will come out this Thursday, updated to today. But, the dramatic thing or the noticeable thing here is, we continue to make progress in Chatham, getting our Chatham residents vaccinated. You can see the numbers overall have increased, and the percentage of people that are only partially vaccinated has decreased as more people receive their second dose and fall into the fully vaccinated category. So, we continue to make good progress. Unfortunately, or fortunately or unfortunately, the younger demographics, the 20 to 29-year-olds are one of the lower ones. And obviously the 12 to 15-year-olds, because the vaccine is, they are the newest group to be getting the vaccine. But we continue to make good, steady progress. And we have a substantial majority of Chatham residents now fully vaccinated against COVID-19. And then the final figure I just wanted to show you, and this is something we've also shared before, and it's an indication that consistent with what we saw last spring and early summer. On a statewide basis for the previous 2 weeks, the highest number of cases are in the younger demographic, the 20 to 39-year-olds. Between those two age groups, they account for almost 45% of all the cases in Massachusetts. So, you know, that's been consistent with the message that we've been saying for months, you know, that age demographic kind of feels that, you know, they're not going to get it, or if they do get it, it's not a problem. But as I'm sure everybody sees on the nightly news or reads in the newspaper, a substantial majority of that age group is coming down with the Delta variant. And in many cases, it is resulting in severe disease and hospitalizations. May not result in deaths, but it's still putting a substantial strain on the healthcare system. So that's all I have for the graphics tonight. And then I just wanted to give you an update on something that just came out hot off the presses this afternoon. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has updated their guidance for fully vaccinated individuals. And they are now recommending, because of the spread of the Delta variant, that even fully vaccinated individuals wear a mask indoors in public settings if you're in an area that the CDC calls an area of substantial or high transmission. I can tell you that Barnstable County is considered by CDC an area of high transmission. They have 4 levels: low, moderate, substantial, and high. Barnstable County is in the highest category. It is the only it's the only county in Massachusetts which is in that high category. So based on that, with the CDC recommendation, they are now recommending that even fully vaccinated people wear a mask indoors in public settings. And as I said, that change just came out this afternoon and is new news. I'm sure it'll be all over the news tonight. And we will be evaluating that over the next day or so in terms of what impact it may have on town offices, summer town meeting, and other indoor events or other events that are being planned over the next, you know, several weeks here. But again, it just goes to show how quickly that Delta variant is taking hold and how highly transmissible it is. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Dr. Bob, I have one real quick one. When you said Barnstable County, is it skewed because of Provincetown, or is it just across the board in other areas? I'm trying to, you know, our numbers are still relatively low, but they're going up. Not that that changes anything, but I'm just trying to understand the numbers.
It is partially screwed by the Provincetown outbreak, but there has been increase in cases in almost every community in Barnstable. Not all as high as what's happened in Provincetown, but Truro has also seen a substantial uptick in cases, as you can imagine, being the town right next to Provincetown. But other towns on the Cape are seeing higher numbers, and so it is really based on a county-wide situation.
Thanks. Shireen?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you an update from Senator Sears' office as well. I talked with him over the weekend about having served on the COVID task force that we had stopped meeting over the last couple of months like everybody. But the senator wanted to reiterate that the task force will come back and up and running if we feel that there's a immediate need for it, but right now not so much. But Jillian's glad to share any recommendations he might think are prudent to Chatham in itself as a, you know, tourist community. One of the things he mentioned, which I'm going to put it out there, but I'm not sure where I would land on this. Of course, this would be something that would be a discussion with the Board of Health and probably through the state. But he thought it might be a good idea for some of the higher density businesses to start requiring vaccination validations for people to come into their businesses. I'm not particularly fond of this plan at this point, and I think it would be something that would warrant a lot of discussion from the because of the health factor, but also because of the economic factor that could be.
Thank you, Shereen. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Bob. I have a few questions. The 7 cases in Chatham in July, were they symptomatic? Do we know?
Most of the cases were either asymptomatic or mild symptoms. Those are the kind of questions that VNA is checking for. And in reviewing all those cases over the weekend, that's the situation. So mild symptoms or no symptoms at all.
And you mentioned that 6 were vaccinated. Were they fully vaccinated? Do we know that? Johnson & Johnson is just 1 shot, but the others require 2. Do we know? Do we have a breakdown on that?
Yes. Of the 7 cases, I indicated that 1 case there was no data on. 1 case was indicated as partially vaccinated, meaning they probably only had 1 of the 2 doses, and the other 5 cases were all fully vaccinated. And most of them, several months ago. It wasn't like they just got vaccinated, recently. These were all, how do I say it politically correct, older demographic folks who had received the vaccine, earlier last spring.
Were they vaccinated with the 2-dose vaccine or the 1-dose vaccine? Do we know that?
Most of those, if I recall, were the 2-dose, either Pfizer or Moderna.
Okay. And I think I just heard you say they were older people. I was going to ask what the demographic was, if we knew.
Yeah, we do know. I didn't break those numbers out specifically, but a fair majority of them were in the older demographics. And by older, I mean that could be 50 or more,
Sure.
if you will. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment. I appreciate what Shereen just said. I read the article in today's Cape Cod Times where Senator Sear was interviewed, and I took away from his comments, and he mentioned, for example, that there are only 4 hospitalizations in each of the 2 hospitals on Cape Cod. I don't know if that's changed, but that's what was reported today. And I took away from his comments that we should be cautious and careful, but not go crazy. And that's how I think the whole country should operate. I mean, Dr. Walensky, who is the she the director of CDC, I've forgotten what her position is, but she's a Boston
Director of CDC.
Yeah, she's a Boston physician, and she referred to this as a pandemic of the unvaccinated, and that's really what it is. And
Yep.
I think the CDC and the federal government and the state has to be very careful so as not to discourage people from getting vaccinated by telling people that even though you're vaccinated, you have to go around wearing masks. I think people should exercise appropriate caution and precautions in their interactions with people. So I think that's really a very important part of this. Is the one last question, did the CDC make clear what their rationale was for fully vaccinated people to have to wear masks? Because we've heard so much in the last year and a half that wearing masks protects the wearer, or doesn't protect the wearer, but it protects the party opposite who might be infected, because apparently there isn't sufficient data on whether a vaccinated person can transmit the disease. Did they express any opinion on that?
They didn't specifically in the guidance that came out today. However, there has been a fair amount of discussion recently with the Delta variant that the viral load in somebody's nasal passages is significantly higher than it is with the base strain, if you will. Mm-hmm. Meaning that that person does have a greater chance of transmitting the virus to others. That's still being researched, but it is clear that there is a much higher load in the nasal passages of people with the Delta variant. Now, exactly, what that means, that's still being researched, but that's one of the reasons why they have gone ahead and made this recommendation that falls into that category, if you will.
Thank you for that. It still strikes me that what's being asked is that people wear the mask to protect the virus from infecting someone who might not be vaccinated. That's largely the
Correct.
issue.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
correct.
and
Yep.
I'm very concerned that, the country might be headed precipitously in the wrong direction here. But we'll see what happens. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Thank you. You okay? Okay, do I have anyone in the room that has a comment or a question? Jill?
Mr. Chairman, so the Summer Residence Advisory Committee will be hosting their town meeting a week from today in this room, and it's been advertised as an in-person meeting. So while the meeting still will be held, it's the August 3rd at 7 p.m. We're also offering a virtual option, so it will be a hybrid meeting, so that we'll have a Teams meeting link for people to participate remotely, and town staff will be participating remotely. The capacity for this room is, I believe, like 151, and because of the number of Summer Residence Advisory Committee members are 9, and with if you as board members are participating in the public, and they've had a turnout as high as 101 attending their meetings. We don't want to discourage people from attending and participating, but it will be on Channel 18 Live. It will be live streamed, and now a new option will be available for it to be a virtual Teams meeting for public participation. So we encourage people to log in there, and then we'll play it by ear until we hear from the Board of Health about in-person meetings in this room. They've been very successful. Right now, it's about set up for about 35 people, and they're sitting comfortably apart. So I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention. We might have to revisit it, but we are going to wait until the Board of Health gives us information and takes the lead on it.
Okay, thank you. I have one hand up on Teams. Anybody on the telephone that wants to ask Dr. Bob a question or have a comment? Hearing none, it looks like Ms. Gibbs.
Yes, thank you. I just have a couple questions and a comment. I know that, Dr. Bob, you had said that in Provincetown, a lot of them were Delta. In our group, were they Delta? And the second question is, were they totally independent of each other, or could they have been at a party together? Do we know that? Was it a cluster?
Yeah, in answer, well, what's happening in Chatham would not be considered a cluster. They are individual cases. There are a couple of circumstances where they are in the same household. As far as whether or not they are Delta variant, that I do not know. I don't know specifically if these particular cases have been sent out for sequencing or not. The state is sequencing a fair number from the Provincetown area, but whether or not these have been particularly set aside for sequencing, that I don't know.
Okay, and the only other thing I had to say is I echo what Dean DeCastro has said. I am concerned that since we know that the hospitalizations are down and deaths are down and that people are having mild cases, that we don't jump into a position where we are putting people in lockdown. I think that is going to result in exactly what Selectman DeCastro said, that people are just going to be afraid to get vaccinated. And the only other thing is, I haven't heard the term herd immunity now for about 8-10 months. We were told that that was really effective, that if people are basically healthy and young, that it's not a bad thing for them to get it, because then they have an automatic immunity to a large degree. And I haven't heard the CDC mention that. Is that no longer the case, that it's a good thing to have herd immunity?
It remains a good thing to have herd immunity. However, the United States has not gotten there yet. The minimum that we would need for herd immunity is about 70% of the population fully vaccinated. We're only at about 63%, 64%. There are some experts that indicate that herd immunity really wouldn't kick in until about 80%. The concern that's going on is that this Delta variant is so much more transmissible. And while hospitalizations and all are down, the unvaccinated people that are getting the Delta variant are becoming much sicker, and it is resulting in more hospitalizations. Keep in mind that hospitalizations and deaths generally lag about 2 to 3 weeks behind when an outbreak begins. So even though hospitalizations may be low now, as we go further in the summer, and we're seeing it in other states across this country, where hospitalizations are extremely high because they've been dealing with the Delta variant longer, if you will, than we have necessarily here in Massachusetts. So, the best guidance that the public health sector can give is get vaccinated, because even if you get COVID-19, once you've been vaccinated, more than likely you will have a very mild case or no symptoms at all. It's really the unvaccinated now that are coming down with severe disease, resulting in hospitalizations, resulting in deaths, resulting in being on ventilators. There's stories on the news every night about people that didn't get vaccinated and now been in the hospital for extended periods of times and wish they had gotten vaccinated. So unfortunately, they had to learn the lesson the hard way. The simplest thing is just go out and get vaccinated, protect yourself, and protect all of those around you.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Any other comments or questions from the public? Okay, seeing or hearing none, we'll move on to our public comments on any of our business agenda requests. Anyone in the room? Seeing none, again, you can speak on the water when we get to it. And I see none or hear nothing from our remote participants. So let's move ahead with our first business item, and it's a special one-day alcohol permit for the If the Shoe Fits. And I see, is Cece here? No? Yes. Hey, guys.
Yes, my name is Cece
Welcome.
Hadawar. I have If the Shoe Fits, 442 Main Street, and I'm having an event, a trunk show on the 29th, so I'm cutting it pretty close here, and I'm looking for a one-day permit for that function from 1 to 6 in the afternoon.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Shireen?
Hi, how are you
Hi,
today?
good.
Good. I see that the application actually does say 12 to 7, so you've
Okay.
shortened the time to
Yeah,
1
I
to
have.
6,
Mhm.
because it seemed like a long time for
it
an
did,
event like
yeah.
that. I understand it was probably coordinating with the trunk show?
Right.
Okay. And the trunk show's outside, and...
It's going to be outside under a tent. I think the weather's going to be fine. If not, we'll move it inside, but right now we're planning for the
Yeah,
outside.
it looks like a nice day that day.
Yeah.
And the alcohol will be served inside? And be
Inside.
self-contained inside the building?
Exactly.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Thank you. Corey?
No, kind of the question, similar to what Shireen said. Just for clarification, the alcohol is going to be served inside and then limited to inside, or are we going to bring it outside within a designated tent area?
No, I'm going to keep the alcohol inside.
Okay.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
clarifies that, because
Okay.
I know we've had discussions about different other previous applicants and where the boundary is. So if
Yeah.
it's kept inside, I think that
It's
would be.
easier to control.
Fully agree.
All right.
All right, no other questions.
Thanks.
Thank you. Dean?
Thank you. Corey and Shireen asked some questions I was going to ask, but I'll ask one last one. I think you did one or more of these last year.
I
don't know.
did.
Yeah, so I'm very supportive of you doing this again, but how are you going to protect against underage alcohol consumption?
The three of us, my manager's 30, they're all, of course, of age, and so I will be in charge. It will be in a room that nobody can get to. It's not
Okay.
going to be self-serve.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other comments? No, can I have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the special one-day alcohol permit for wine and malt beverages only to CC Hedawar as representative of If the Shoe Fits LLC for service at 442 Main Street on Thursday, July 29th from 1 to 6 p.m.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Okay.
All right.
Take a vote. Shireen?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Chair says aye.
Thank you.
Enjoy. Thank
Okay.
you. Okay. Next is our parade awards. Justin. Welcome, Justin. Thank you. Good parade.
So, my name's Justin Bohannon. I'm the chairman of the Independence Day Parade Committee. First, on behalf of the committee, we just want to thank the whole community for just a great day on the 3rd. Just everyone was great at the parade. It felt like a normal year. It was really just a great day, and everyone really just celebrated in the best way we could have hoped. So thank you, everyone. And now to the awards. So our first award is for Best Use of Technology, and that goes to the Monomoy Yacht Club. I don't know if anyone is here from, I guess not. The Best Environmentally Conscious entry is the Oyster River Boatyard. Okay. The Best Civic entry goes to First Night Chatham.
All right, he's here.
The Best Family entry goes to the Magner family. The Funniest entry goes to the Chatham Drama Guild. The Most Patriotic entry goes to the Ken Owens Memorial Soccer Jamboree. The Best Youth entry goes to the Chatham Yacht Club. Overall third place goes to Eventide Landscaping, Irrigation, and Goodies. Overall second place goes to the Chatham Yacht Club. And overall first place for at least the third parade in a row is the Phillips Farm family.
Usually has the whole family.
Love it. Thank you very much, John. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll celebrate with this. Thank you all very much. This will be a lot. Thank you.
Again, thank you, everyone, and we look forward to next year.
Thank you, Justin. Just a minute, Shereen.
Yeah.
Justin, I'm sure the rest of the board feels the same way, but we just want to say thank you very much for the work and dedication of your committee. And of course, Corey was your liaison there, to get us to get a parade in such short notice. And I have to tell you, it was just a pure delight to be able to walk down Main Street and see so many smiling faces and see such joy with everybody for that day. So thank you very much for your committee's time and energy.
Yeah, and Justin, there was one vote against that parade.
Yes, there was.
And that individual walked in that parade.
Yes.
And it was a super parade. Well done. Corey?
No, I mean, It's been a pleasure serving as your liaison. I'm happy to keep doing it. You guys did a great job. You know, it was a tough position to be put in, and you guys pulled it off. And I look forward to next year's parade. And a good call on the weather too. So dial that same weather in for next year.
Yeah, yeah, it was good.
Dean?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add my congratulations to
Thank
the
you.
winners and also to your committee and the Board of Health for making it possible as well.
Yes.
I know one of your members is here and he straddles both both boards. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Justin.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is our drinking water testing and pumping. Tom Temple, I think he's on, yeah.
Thank you,
Tom
Mr.
gonna be-
Chair.
There you
Thank
are.
you.
Hang on just a second, Tom. People are leaving and we'll get right with you. Okay, go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Just to recap, I just want to let everybody know that well 5 is still offline and remains offline until such time as the samples are below the Mass DEP's maximum contaminated levels, and permission is granted by Mass DEP for the blending of well 5 and 8, as well as approval by the Select Board is granted to introduce the blending of the wells into the distribution system. Drinking water is safe. Well 5 remains offline, as I indicated. We did get the new second quarter samples today. And I don't know if they were, I think they were forwarded to you by Dr. Duncanson, but let me see if I can pull this up on the screen.
Yeah, we have a hard copy too, Tom.
Oh, you do, okay, yeah. All right, if you have a hard copy, then.
Well, you can get it up there, yeah. Yeah, you should probably put it on there anyway.
All right, let me see if I can get that for you.
Okay.
Can you see that?
Not yet.
All right. It's opening, but it won't let me get it on your screen.
Can Shauna get it on? Shauna's gonna try also, it looks like.
I'll let her try.
Okay.
In any case, just to go through the numbers real quick, as I indicated, we received the second quarter results today. South Chatham, non-detect. Orton Road plant, non-detect. Indian Hill, non-detect. Training field well 8 was 7.8. The sample was taken from the blended sample, station number 10029. And well 5 was not running at the time of that sample, so the numbers are well below the threshold for the MCL, I'm sorry. And training field wells number 5 was, the two samples taken was 6.77 and 6.50. So that was great news that we were seeing those well below the thresholds. There you go, thank you very much, Shauna. The next sampling will be taking place for well 5 will be August 3rd. We'll continue sampling twice a month to gain all the necessary results that we need for DEP. Just so you know, the pumpage, because of the rain that we've had at the beginning part of this month, our pumpage is 13.1% decrease compared to the same time last year, and that was as of up to July 25th, that result. That equates to 9,906,200 gallon decrease from the same time last year. So We currently, we just received the contracts that I mentioned in the reports for training field well number 5, 5 and 8 study, as well as wells 10 and 9 design and engineering costs to complete those wells, as well as the PFAS groundwater modeling and contamination source inventory study that we discussed last week. So we do have those. I'll be reviewing those, and also other town staff will be reviewing to make sure that we have everything in there that we're looking for. The wells have been running 16 to 18 hours per day. We reduced the flows for wells 2 and 8 to help prevent low well levels. The storage tank hit the low level 2 times this past week. And all our bacteria sampling that was taking for the last 2 rounds have come back clean. So everything's looking good on the water side of things. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Let me go to the board first. I just have a quick one. I mean, obviously, the initial question everybody's going to ask is, okay, back in April, we had high numbers, and now it seems that it isn't there. Does it flow away from us, or any idea why? I know it's not quite a fair question, but it's good news anyway. But.
Yeah, it's hard to say, and I could probably leave that to the experts. If Leah, if you want to comment on that, that would be helpful for the board.
Hi. So we are seeing pretty significant variation in the sampling for PFAS. And part of the problem is that we have so much, we have so little data. The numbers are all over the place a little bit. 60 to 40 to 8 or 6, which is what we're seeing on the training field wells, is a little bit more variation than what we're seeing on the analysis side of things. We think some of that may have something to do with the groundwater table, which we talked about 2 weeks ago, I believe, which is the reason why we moved forward with the groundwater study.
Okay.
I also think this is very new. This is new technology. These are new analysis. This is new regulations. And some of the critics of the regulatory people would say that we rushed the Massachusetts MCL a little bit, if that makes sense to you, because this is emerging and evolving.
Yeah, for me, it's testing, and how confident are you on the testing? It's not a question, it's just a comment. And let me put it over to the board. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Tom, the decline in usage and pumpage in the last several weeks, as you said, it was 13.9%. And you mentioned, the weather we had. Is there any indication that there's been a decline in the number of visitors in town? Is that partially responsible? Do we know? We have any sense of that?
I don't believe that's the case. I think that between the mandatory and all the talk about PFAS, as well as the people that are trying to follow the mandatory restrictions, I think the numbers are way down, and the rain definitely helped because they're not watering because we had so much rainy weather at the beginning of the month. So I think it's kind of all 3 things combined together to give us the numbers that we're seeing and the pumpages that we're seeing. If we'd had a lot more sun at the beginning of the month, I'm sure that our numbers would be a lot higher, and I'm sure that the 4th of July, with the number of people that would have been utilizing the water, I'm sure we would have been in a lot of trouble with trying to keep up with the pumpage had we had a nice sunny long weekend.
Okay, so your memo references enforcement letters have gone out. Have we had any resistance when these letters have gone out, and have any fines been levied for violating the restrictions?
To date, right now, we've had a lot of people that have called regarding the letters that were sent out, but we haven't had any second offenders yet where they've been fined. We're still looking every time we're driving around, and we have people out from Weston and Sampson that are, monitoring the irrigation systems as they're going to different stations, et cetera. So they take photos and they use their iPads to document and then, send that information back to our dispatch here, and then we form the letters. And we haven't had any fines yet, but we have had a lot of people questioning and saying that they weren't aware of some of the regulations, and they've since changed their timing, and we'll talk to their irrigation specialist to make the necessary changes. So it's been positive. I think people understand, that this is a serious time for the Cape, where we're in a drought situation still, and a lot of the Western or Middlesex County, they've gotten all the rain, for the last couple months, where everything's really green and flourishing there. Everything's pretty dry down here still.
So you really haven't had any negative pushback?
Very little. I mean, there's some people that have called and said that they're on a private well and those kind of things, but nothing earth-shattering.
Your memo says that there's a delay in getting well 4 operational, and now it's pushed back into September. You do talk about the potential for emergency use of well number 5 if the need should arise. I guess I just wanted to make the comment that I'm hoping we don't have to get to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to be upfront with everybody to show where we were. The numbers, the last 3 samplings have all been down in the 8s and 7s, so they're good numbers. However, Weston and Sampson reached out to Mass DEP. They've contacted them to find out if we had to or we needed to in a case of an emergency, and Mass DEP put together the protocol that I mentioned in the agenda report.
Yeah, can you just explain, for the benefit of those who might not have read your memo, why well 4 is being delayed about a month? Or can someone explain that?
All the materials that we're finding that the supplies to try to get the construction materials that we need and all the materials associated with getting this up and running is delayed quite extensively because of COVID-19 and the delays when people were out of work and not working. And so the demand is all pushed back. And so the delays, we thought we might be in a position where we would be operational in, August, but now it looks like we're closer to September, given all the manufacturers that Weston and Sampson reached out to, and they determined that the closest will probably be September.
So it's a supply chain issue?
Yes.
And you do note that in order for an emergency usage of well 5 to occur, you'd have to come back to the select board for an okay.
Not only would we have to come back to the select board, but we would also have to have permission from Mass DEP as well. So yeah. It's a twofold thing, and everybody's aware, the requirements set forth in this.
Yeah, I suspect no one's going to be particularly keen about doing that. Just one last question. The groundwater modeling study that we authorized at a recent meeting, has a contract, maybe this goes to the town manager, has a contractor been identified? What's the status of that study? And I know we heard Ms. Freeman talked about it in the public agenda.
Yeah, I haven't received them yet, so certainly Tom can answer that question, and then we can review the scope.
Tom, do you have anything to offer on that? Have we identified?
Yeah, we received the, like I had mentioned, the groundwater modeling and contaminated source inventory study. We received the contract today, and we should be forwarding that after we review it. We'll get that right to the town manager for her signature so we can move forward with that study.
Have you identified the contractor, and is that public information, or are there several that you're looking at?
Right now, I'm looking at Weston and Sampson, where they're the town's water and sewer professional engineers that are in charge of this. So I'd like to have it done by the people that are taking care of our water.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Corey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, more comments. So, I mean, I think we've been very lucky with the weather we've had in July, because if the weather was warmer and other factors, I'm sure the strain on our demand would have been greater. And there's no crystal ball. We don't know what kind of population we're going to have in August or in the fall. My expectation is going to be stable or grow. If last year's pattern stays this year's pattern, there's going to be a lot of individuals and visitors and people staying here over the next couple of months. So I'm concerned that if the weather shifts to nicer weather, where people want to water the lawns more or whatever, our demand is going to get up there, and where that leaves us. I guess my only question is, if we start heading in that direction, can you just kind of do an overview of this blending concept and how that's going to play into the conversation? But that's something that has been mentioned, in prior conversations we've had, and I still get a lot of questions, exactly what that is. So for the public and everything, can you just kind of give a kind of little summary of this blending concept and, things we need to consider moving forward over the next, quarter?
Yeah, if we in a situation where we have to blend and we get permission from both DEP and the select board, what would happen is we would be required, based on what Mass DEP had suggested as their protocol, they would require sampling 24 hours of within 24 hours of activation, monthly PFAS sampling while in use, as well as monthly sampling average for the quarterly to determine if there's any violations of the 20 UG MCL. So with that said, we have to meet all those thresholds in order to use that well and blend it with 8. So that would we would be taking samples of both wells 5 and 8 before they're blended together, as well as after, and we'd be taking them more regularly and have to meet all the requirements from DEP to do so.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Shereen?
So I just wanted to go back to the sampling a little bit, in looking for data trends in that. We do the quarterly samples, and then it looks like we did a quarterly sample in April, and then we did sampling on 5/20, 6/1, 6/15, 6/24, 6/29, and 7/13, not all the wells. And we're seeing that well 5 has a downward trend on its numbers, and we know that PFAS is like somewhat of an anomaly. Is there a scope where you see where you might be able to start, in your testing, you see where you might be able to see the trends start to happen, or see where those trends lie? Will it be another 6 months? Will it be, another, quarter, or?
We're hoping that with the study that we're hoping that Weston and Sampson can perform and start monitoring that, we're hoping to get better data from that, as well as the sampling that we're continuing. We're continuing to do the sampling every other week, and we'll continue to do that right along, just to keep collecting the data.
Okay.
Once they start the groundwater study and they start performing, that and finding out what's contributing and if there's anything that we can pick up and find out if there's any areas that are affecting it, that may change, how we're pumping and what we're doing. But it's all relatively new, and I think, Leah, you can chime in if there's other things that you see that might be happening as well as trying to get well 5 on and monitoring, the PFAS situation.
I'll chime in if it's helpful, but I thought you handled that perfectly.
That's fine. That's fine enough. I just wanted to make sure the sampling is by law, correct? We do the sampling by law, or is that just?
It's very straightforward.
Okay.
It's Safe Drinking Water Act, maximum contaminant level, 20 parts per trillion. It's actually a lifetime exposure limit. So and that's the way the 20 parts per trillion was set. So if you're under the 20 parts per trillion, you are in compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. It gets a little dicey when we're having samples jumping over under it and it's not consistent. So the answer to your question is more data will be better, and it certainly will help us make long-term decisions about what to do with that well field.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dean?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just really wanted to ask a question which is triggered by the request that Ms. Freeman made, and maybe she's going to speak to it during this portion, about examining wells other than 4, 5, and 8. As I understood what she was asking, we would take a look at all the other wells in town. Is that something that's indicated? I would suspect if we wanted to do that, we probably would have to have an additional contract, and we might have to get an appropriation. Otherwise, we're going to be expending all the money in the town manager's account that was used to fund this study. And we might have to, I think we're probably going to have a special town meeting in September to deal with water issues, and maybe that's something that we could consider at that time. But if it's too premature to be asking this question at this time, please tell me. I guess it's a question for Leah, perhaps. Does it make sense to look at those wells as well?
Bob, did you want to answer? I'm happy to answer.
I see Dr. Duncanson. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to chime in because I'm the one that suggested at the last meeting that we concentrate the source study on wells 4, 5, and 8. And you know, my thinking on that is we now have 2 quarterly samples for the South Chatham well field as well as the wells in the town forest that have been non-detect. So, you know, it just didn't seem to me to make prudent sense to spend a lot of money and time looking in areas of town where we don't have an issue, but rather to concentrate around the areas of 4, 5, and 8 because that's where we've had the detects. Now, that's not to say that if, you know, time and money were no object, we couldn't do a town-wide study, but it just, you know, given the fact that we don't have issues in 2 of the other large well fields, it just didn't make sense necessarily to do that in the short term. So I don't know if that helps address the question.
It does, but I'm just looking at the chart that we had on the board. So I'm not seeing non-detect on them, for example, the South Chatham wells.
Yeah, if you look
South
at
Chatham.
Oh, South Chatham
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's non-detect.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
revised the spreadsheet
Okay.
today after I had
I
a
see it
discussion
now.
with Tom Barr. Because originally we had non-detects for the 3 individual wells at 1, 2, and 3, and 6, 7, and 9. But in reality, that's not the way the samples were taken. Those samples were taken after, like wells 1, 2, and 3 were all blended together. And then they were taken out there. And the same with 6, 7, and 9. The samples were actually taken at the water treatment plant where those 3 wells are blended together. And so that's why you see the non-detects for South Chatham treated 1, 2, and 3, and in the water treatment plant. And both of those have been negative on both quarterly samples.
Okay.
So again, it didn't make sense to spend time and money there if we didn't need to.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And just so you know, we have to take samples of all of our wells before they're entering the system as part of our requirements with DEP.
That's quarterly.
Yes,
Okay, and that includes PFAS.
that includes everything, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for the explanations. Obviously, it's something we need to continue to
Okay,
watch.
anyone
Thank you.
else from the board? No, I see some from the public. Zeichman?
Hello.
Welcome, Debbie.
My name is Deborah Ecker. I'm a resident of the town of Chatham. My residence is at 70 Sears Point Lane. Given time restrictions, by the way, is this mic appropriate? I'm not sure whether my distance is correct on this.
Is the green light on, Debbie? On the microphone?
It should be.
You're fine.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Given time restrictions, I'm not going to talk about the importance of acceptable drinking water for the future of our town. Instead, I want to make it clear how important it is for the town to go beyond the proposed PFAS study, which you've been talking about. In 2003, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection did a source water assessment and protection report for our town. They did it for the Chatham Water Department. This report was an inventory of uses within the boundary of the land area from which the town's water is pumped, and an assessment at the same time of the susceptibility of contamination from sources within this boundary. One of the opening statements of this report is the following: Chatham wells 1 through 3 and Training Field well number 5 are located in an aquifer with a high vulnerability to contamination due to the absence of hydrogeologic barriers, i.e., a contiguous clay layer that can prevent contaminant migration from Zone 2 into Zone 2. The report includes a table of land uses in the town's 2 protection zones, 1 and 2. It is from this table that I report the following numbers. Among the 10 commercial property uses located within these pumping districts, 7 of the 10 are ranked as high risk. 3 is medium. From having been a visitor and subsequently a resident of Chatham for more than 70 years, I have to ask us, how could Chatham have allowed these uses within the zones from which our drinking water is pumped? Of course, some were pre-World War II, but others came later when the town was growing. We should have known better. Within our drinking water protection district, Chatham has an airport with the potential contaminants, and again, I'm quoting from the report: fuels, de-icers, salt, other hazardous chemicals, spills, leaks, even improper handling. The airport preceded the town planning for Chatham, but Chatham planned the development within the water district of an industrial park. In this, we have a body shop, which has, again I'm quoting, vehicle paints, solvents, and primer products, and the report adds the potential of improper management. These are serious misuses for our water district. The DEP also reports boatyards in these districts with, again, hazards of fuels, paints, and solvents, and spills and leaks. Under the industrial listing, there are 4 categories of use, all listed as high risk. There could be changes of property, of course, since this 2003 report, but I think this inventory is close to what we have today and should be taken seriously. Last month, we also had a second report about our water, which should be an alert. The July 6th analysis by the United States Environmental Protection Agency regarding the airport's environmental assessment, which they submitted in connection with the expansion of use for the airport. This report had serious questions about the airport's approach to aquifer protection. 1, the airport provided no information about groundwater, its depth or flow direction. Flow direction, of course, is critical for spilled fuels because the airport is only 0.2 miles east of the Indian Hill well, 0.35 miles north of well 8, and 0.54 miles north of the Training Field well. The location of these wells relative to these potentials for contamination is really alarming. The July DP letter recommends the town and airport work together on wellhead protection. That certainly makes sense. DEP also pointed out that spill prevention is a critical airport activity and that the Chatham Airport did not submit any plan on this. They should. And the town should require one also. The DEP noted that because of the proposed construction's proximity to public drinking wells, there should be an erosion and sediment control plan, including stormwater runoff controls. Not only should there be a plan, but preventatives, they said, should be constructed. The town should be requiring this also. So in conclusion, here's what I have to say in conclusion that is relevant to your discussion today. There are risks to our drinking water beyond the PFASs. Many were identified 18 years ago by the Mass EPA, and more by this summer's U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. In summary, it is my strong recommendation that your board not limit the scope of this proposed study to only the PFAS problem and to the limited number of wells. Instead, please extend the study range to review the threats identified by these state and federal agencies. With reports in hand listing these risks to our water resources, it makes sense to extend the study, no matter what the additional cost. Cost should really be, not even be a consideration relative to the importance of protecting our drinking water. So may the town take this issue, this PFA issue, as a reminder that the time has come to examine the total picture of our drinking water issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Anyone else? I see a little movement. No? No, okay. Thank you. Anyone else on, let's see, I see Ms. Gibbs. Anyone on the telephone like to speak? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Gibbs.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 3 comments and then 2 questions. I would hope that when 4, 5, and 8 come back online, that we would test them weekly rather than monthly, because we know that the fluctuations are dramatic, and as dramatically as they fell, they could go up again. And I think that the no detect wells, rather than, until we sort this all out and do our groundwater testing, that if it's possible to test those wells that are currently no detect on a monthly versus a quarterly basis. And to echo Ms. Ecker's comments, I think Commerce Park is close to the airport, is close to those wells 4, 5, and 8. And that should probably be looked at in terms of groundwater testing as well. My first question is, are we testing wells 10 and 11? Because they're coming up at the special town meeting for us to be spending $3.6 million to get them up and running. But I'm wondering if we have been testing them all along to see if there are PFAS in it, because they're not on the chart.
It's either Tom or Dr. Duncanson.
Wells 10 and 11 technically don't exist yet. The well casings are in place, but the pumps and all are not yet in place. So there has been testing of those wells before they were installed. There are groundwater monitoring wells in the area, and there were tests of those done, in past years. But there has been no testing of those recently that I'm aware of, because they're not production wells yet. They're not fully installed.
Yeah, that's correct.
They were not active prior to 2010?
No, those, as I said, those wells do not exist yet. The casings are there, but there are no pumps down inside them. There's no pump houses built yet. That's what the $3.6 million appropriation seeks to do, is to basically finish those wells so that we can bring them into production.
Okay, thank you. Now, the other question is simply a clarification on the infrastructure. This was talked about at the last meeting, and I'm still not clear on it. And you can tell me if my assumptions are wrong. My understanding is that the storage tanks have blended water in it, but they're only used if various wells in towns get too low, and then that water is sent out. And that otherwise residents draw their water normally from wells that are near them. And as an example, I'm downtown, so I assume I would not be drawing water from South Chatham. So if that is correct,
The tanks are in use all the time. The tanks are the primary purpose of the tanks is to pressurize the system. You know, obviously, the higher the water is, the greater pressure will come out of fire hydrants or taps, and that's why you build water tanks at the high point, is to provide that pressure. In terms of filling the tanks, it depends on how low the tanks are. When the tanks are very low, they could be drawing water from all the various wells in town to fill that tank. And in terms of individual properties, and same thing that we said at past meetings, if you're in South Chatham, chances are most of your water that you're seeing is from the South Chatham well field. If you're on the east side of town, on the Chatham Harbor side, because you're a ways away from any particular well, your water could basically be a mixture of any of the wells or multiple wells, depending on the time of day. I mean,
And
we don't have a well specific for a neighborhood. It all goes into the same system, and depending on the demand in a particular area, it may or may not mix with water coming from other areas of town where the demand happens to be lower.
And both water tanks also are tested as well, and samples taken from both wells. I mean, from both storage tanks.
I guess my question was, for the people who are living near 4, 5, and 8, would they more likely be drinking that water versus someone in South Chatham, or I'm sorry, in downtown or North Chatham? Because people, if we knew where our water was basically coming from, we could individually do things on our end where we can get home PFAS filtration systems. But if we don't know, if you're saying we could all possibly be getting water from 4, 5, and 8, then I guess it's a moot point, right?
In many respects, yes. That's correct, because you wouldn't know at any particular moment where the water coming out of your tap originated from. It could be at one point from a particular well, another time it could be coming from the mixed tank, it could be coming from a combination of wells. It all depends on the demand at any particular moment during the course of the day. And I would just caution people, same thing I said, in previous meetings, caution people about home treatment systems to remove PFAS. If you're going to go in that direction, which is, your prerogative, just be sure that the treatment unit you may be looking at provides you assurance that it can get down below the Massachusetts limit. There are various treatment systems that are available that will get you below the EPA health advisory of 70 parts per trillion, but not all those systems can also get below the 20 parts per trillion for the Massachusetts MCL. So that may require a little bit of dogging some of these vendors to make sure they provide adequate data to prove to you that their system will meet the Massachusetts limits.
Yep. Okay. I would just say that I hope that we look at other areas in town, as Debbie Ecker said, where it is suspicious that they could be contributing to the groundwater that is causing these elevations, because I think that's really important that we get a handle on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none. I just have one simple question for you, Tom. Explain just simply you have wells that are pumping. They go directly to our water treatment plant. Is that correct? Or are they purify, or are they, or is there some other, or are they going to some other place?
Right
All-
now,
all-
the,
Oh, go ahead.
right now, wells 6, 7, and 9 have a filtration system that removes the iron and manganese.
Right.
Some of the other wells they're all sampled at their own individual locations, as well as what's needed. As part of the data collection that's being done also tells us how we're treating our water, what we need to do to treat our water at the different locations. So it's important when we collect the data from quarterly samples, as well as the additional samples that we're taking for, wells 5 and 8, that we're looking at that data, because we know moving forward what we're going to need to do to treat at those locations. But right now, each well is independent, other than 6, 7, and 9, which has the whole system, which is taking out the iron and manganese from that station itself.
Okay, I understand that, but where does that water go after it's pumped out of the well?
Well, it starts to go to the tank. Everything's going to the tank. And what Dr. Duncanson was trying to say is that if you're living on Morton Road and the water is probably going to go right past your house, it's going to make its way in the system and head to the tank. And chances are you might get well 7 because you're in that area, or 6, 7, or 9 because it's going past you. But as it blends into the system and it gets to the tank, it's introduced into the tank, and it's with all the other, and everything is reduced by the time it gets there. And some of the chlorine that you'll taste when you're close to one of the wells, it gets weaker as it gets into the system, and because you're treating it at each one of those wells. So each one is done and entered into the system, and as it's being pumped and going to the storage tanks are filling up based on the demand. It's stored there. As it's starting to lower back down, as the increase of demand requested, it's drawing down, and then we're pumping harder to fill them back up, and it's coming from all the different wells again to
And
fill that.
all that water is tested.
Yes, all of it, including when it's at the tank.
At the tank,
they're tested.
when it's
There's
going out.
Two samples at each of the storage tanks as well that are also taken.
Okay, any question? I'm sorry? Oh, I don't see, okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, Bart, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to clarify on some of the testing stuff. All of our water, we sample for various things, from PFAS to anything and everything. So we meet all of the Massachusetts Safe Drinking Water Act's requirements for it. On our website, the Chatham Water Department website, you can go and you can see the Consumer Confidence Report. We post that every year with all of the results that we have for the various things that we sample for throughout all of the town. All the well sites, as well as many different distribution ports in town. We have small sample stations that we take bacteria, which we're doing 3 times a week during the summer from April to October. And then during the winter months, we only sample for bacteria once a month, required from Mass DEP. Every year we're issued a sample permit on what they want us to sample for. So we are sampling for various things, tons of different chemicals, and all of that can be seen on the website under the Consumer Confidence Report. Just wanted to let everybody know that that's out there.
Thank you, Tom. Any other comments from the board? Anything from the audience? And let me scroll down on this. No, I see nothing. So we really have no action. Just thank you for the update, Tom, and we'll hope we continue to move ahead. And
You're quite welcome. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
All right, thanks very much. Next on our agenda, I'll make sure I do this right, is the bike path easement between town and Bailey's Path HOA. I guess that's going to be Ally, huh?
That is correct.
our principal
Thank you very
planner.
much.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me tonight. So just quickly, I'll go through the history of this subdivision. In 2001, the planning board approved a 20-lot subdivision. Through this subdivision, the board required a maintenance bond, which over time it has been released, and now we're currently holding $10,000 in this maintenance bond account. The last item that was to be completed was an easement to the town from the developer over the roads and parcel B, and I can share my screen to show you more accurately where that location is to get to the bike path. So that was the last requirement for this maintenance bond to be released in its entirety. Let's see. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So Eastward, who was the developer of this subdivision, they had submitted a draft easement that was required, and it was reviewed by town council, town staff, and in March, the select board endorsed this easement, which was for access over the roads in Bailey's Path, so these roads here, and then over the bike path, which parcel B, I'm sorry, which I've highlighted on my screen, to the bike path here. So like I said, the board in March voted and endorsed this easement. Subsequent to that, the homeowners association approached town staff with a deed showing that Eastward had actually transferred rights from the parcel, this parcel that I've highlighted here, parcel B, from Eastward to the homeowners association. So the homeowners association was fine with allowing the town to have an easement over parcel B going into the bike path. And they have reviewed, after discussions, they have reviewed the easement, approved the easement, and they've actually endorsed it. And so we're here tonight looking to just kind of clean this up so that we can finally release the $10,000 bond to Eastward and we're hopeful that the board will accept this easement and execute the acceptance certificate that's attached to it. I do want to let you know that we did just make a few changes to the easement document that's in your packet tonight. We changed the June date to July to make it more current, obviously. And then there was a comment last time by one of the select board members to put grantee after the town of Chatham, so that change has been made as well. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I don't have any. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ally, just to confirm for the record, the various considerations that were identified by the former highway superintendent, Mr. Colby, back in June of 2005, you did a walkthrough, and those have all been taken care of except for this grant of this easement to the town. So we're being asked to accept this tonight, and the only reason you've come back to us is that it was uncovered that back in 2019, I think it was,
That's correct.
the property was actually conveyed to the homeowners association by Mr. Marsh.
That is
And
correct.
So we need to clean it up, so to speak. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to offer a motion that the board the board vote to accept the easement and execute the acceptance certificate appended to the easement document.
Thank you. Second? Second, Corey?
I'll second. I just have one small little tidbit question.
Okay, go ahead.
It doesn't impact my position on this. I support it, but I just want a little legal education. In the grant of easement, why is the dollar amount not specifically specified and it is less than $10? I'm just very curious. I thought usually there's a dollar amount, $1, but in this particular language is in consideration of less than $10. I'm just more curious.
Mr. Chair, I don't have an answer, but I know town council reviewed it, and so Ally might have that answer.
No, I also, Sorry, thank you. I also don't have a specific answer, but town council did review and approve it. And the HOA's attorney, Jamie Norcross, he also reviewed it and approved it. So we have two legal minds that said it was okay, but I'm not sure of the exact rationale.
I won't comment on that. Maybe negotiate for $5, but I'm just more curious. I'm used to seeing like a dollar or a
I agree.
specific dollar amount. So, thank you.
Good point. Any other comments? All right, let's take a vote. Dean?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Shereen?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Thank you, Ally. Don't go away.
I won't.
Up next is a proposed draft historic preservation incentive zoning bylaw with the chair of the Historic Commission, Mr. Messina. I see he's on. Okay. Frank, are you going to be talking to this, or?
Yeah, I'm going to.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of introductory remarks. This potential bylaw, proposed bylaw, zoning bylaw amendment, is something the Historical Commission has been working on for some time. Needless to say, we, as everything else in the world, was interrupted a lot with COVID, and we had originally hoped to do it, this last year, but we're pressing on, and this proposed bylaw change comes from the Cape Cod Commission working with the Planning Board many years ago, and the Historical Commission picked it up as the Planning Board was found itself involved with many other things, and relative to the fact that the thrust of this zoning bylaw change is historic preservation, we thought it was appropriate. So with Ally's unbelievable attention to this matter and her ability to work this issue, we've made a lot of progress. We have been, and I'm seeing Ally's going to speak to it, we've been before the Planning Board, we've been before the Zoning Board, we've met with Dr. Duncanson, and we're coming full circle. We actually presented this concept to you possibly a year and a half ago, and at the time, I think everybody felt, well, that was a nice idea. And I think the devil's in the details. We're at that point, and Ally's going to make a presentation to you relative to where we are, incorporating some of the comments which we've had from our subsequent meetings with the Planning Board and with the Zoning Board, not all of them. So, but at this particular time, I think as in Ally's and I memo to you, we're not looking for a motion or an action now other than your continued support to the concept and allow us to move forward knowing that the select board is with us on this, and we'll have your support when we get ready to present to the town meeting. I was interesting to hear that you might possibly have a special town meeting in September. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that, but if there is a chance, Ally, I know you have some other things in your life that may distract you, but with that, lady and gentlemen, I'd like to ask Ally to make the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Frank. So I'm just going to begin. I just hope that everyone can see my screen. You could just let me know.
Yes,
Can
we
everyone
can see
see
it.
my
Yeah, we can see it.
Thank you. I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure. Okay. So as Frank mentioned, the Historical Commission has been working on this draft bylaw for a while now. We did come before the Select Board as a concept to see if, comments to go forward with this. And they have been working diligently on drafting and redrafting and hearing comments to try to really nail it down. So I'm just going to walk quickly through the bylaw with you as we have it in its draft form right now. So we'll start first with the purpose and applicability. So the Historic Commission does understand and recognize that there has been a lot of demolition of historic structures. So their hope is to, through this bylaw, to create permitting flexibility of dimensional requirements that might be an impediment to historic preservation. So the purpose is the purpose section allows the Zoning Board of Appeals the authority to issue a special permit by modifying certain dimensional standards on existing lots. And as we walk through this bylaw, I'll go into more detail about what those modifying of certain dimensional standards means exactly. So, applicability. The historic preservation incentives apply to eligible historic buildings as defined in section 152 of the Chatham General Bylaw in all zoning districts. So I just wanted to point out it's not in specific ones, it's in all districts. And I'll go through what this eligible historic buildings means in more detail in the next slide. So again, what is the definition of the eligible historic building? So any building or structure that's listed on the National Register of Historic Places, listed on the State Register of Historic Places, or has been designated by the Chatham Historical Commission to be historically significant building or structure, following a finding by the commission. And then there's the associated more specific details about what they look for. So if this is hard to see, I can stop my PowerPoint and I can blow it up a little bit more. It sometimes is difficult to see through the PowerPoint presentation. So just let me know if that's something that you'd rather me do.
Yeah, you could make it a little bigger. Thanks.
Okay, if you just give me 1 second. Just have to stop sharing my screen and then reshare. Where are you? Here we go. All right.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
is
good.
that better? Okay,
Yeah,
great.
that's great.
All right. So this is just obviously a map of Chatham, and it kind of walks through the different historic structures that we have in town and where they're located. So there is a section, and I'm just blowing up this portion of the map now so it's easier to see. But we do have these little red dots, so after 1920, and then the number of historic structures we have before 1920, and then the number of historic structures we have for a total of 1,212 sites. We, on this map, do identify the Old Village National Register District, the Historic Business District, and then we also did put conservation restrictions on here because that was something that kept coming up, that we should, add that to the map so we can see where conservation restrictions are relative to historic structures. So for this map, and again, I'll go to the map after I finish going through this section here, but basically what we're really looking at are the lots that could have additional building footprint available. So that these would be the ones that would really be eligible for this historic incentive. So in this lighter blue here, there's about 221 relatively lots that could potentially use this incentive that have a little bit left, a tiny bit that they could increase their building footprint. So that's 0 to 299 square feet. So they could expand just a little bit more on their already existing structure. 222, we have about 300 to 1,000 square feet. These lots could expand, up to that. And that's in the light or the middle blue. And then the dark blue, we have in town about 449 lots that could potentially expand over 1,000 square feet. So if you just keep that in mind, if you're looking at the map, it's color coded to show some of those potential parcels that could be eligible for this incentive. We do recognize that there are other zoning limitations that could potentially inhibit some of these parcels from using this incentive, but this is a good kind of generalization of where these potentially could occur. Okay, and then I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so I can go back to the PowerPoint. Okay. All right. So the special permit priority. So we wanted to make sure that the priority in granting these special permits were for if the historic structure remains on site. We obviously think that that's incredibly important to keep that actual historic history and obviously the home on site. But the Historic Commission does recognize, obviously, that sometimes historic buildings are moved from their original site to different locations in town to make sure that, they are preserved, obviously. And so we wanted to give that ability to be able to do, but we wanted to make sure everyone knew that the priority was to keep the buildings and structures in place. And we also, we're thinking of potential holes in the bylaw that could be used. So we just wanted to also very clarify that if a historic structure is transferred from its original site to a different lot, you couldn't use the incentives on that old site for the new house. So we just wanted these incentives. So we just wanted to make doubly sure and put it in the bylaw that you couldn't do that. So everyone knows. All right, so I'm going to get to the specific incentives now that I talked about in the first slide. So the first incentive is, so these are the following waivers, regulatory flexibility that are available for eligible historic buildings and relief from dimensional standards. So the first one is building coverage. And again, this is the Zoning Board of Appeals would be the board that would grant this by special permit to waive building coverage requirements to incentivize the reuse of historic structures. Again, this would be specifically for historic structures, not every building in town, but those historic structures that I mentioned in the definition section before. And so this incentive calculation shall be as follows. The maximum by right building coverage allowed in our protective zoning bylaw multiplied by a factor of no greater than 1.25. And I have some examples because I know that, the wording just sounds, 1.25. So I have some specific examples so that people kind of can understand it more clearly. So on a 20,000 square foot lot, the building coverage by right currently is 2,800 square feet. So if you were to use this incentive, it would allow 3,500 square feet. So that's an increase of 700 square feet. So if you preserved your historic structure, we would allow you additional 700 square feet of building coverage. But again, you have to preserve your historic structure in order to be eligible for this incentive. And this calculation is meant to, it allows for a range. So as your lot gets larger, your range, goes up as well. It becomes larger. So as another example, a 25,000 square foot lot by right, so that's currently what is allowed now, is 2,900 square feet of building coverage. If you use this calculation, it would be 3,625 square feet of building coverage. So that's an increase of 725 square feet. So again, we would allow just a little bit more. And again, it's going up by a range depending on how large your lot is. So skip a few to a 40,000 square foot lot. Currently by right, it's 4,000 square feet. So that's what you're allowed now. And under this incentive, you would be allowed 5,000 square feet of building coverage. So that's an increase of 1,000 square feet. So you can see that the range, it's just not one specific number for every single lot. We really wanted to be thoughtful. And there's a lot of thought that went into it and a lot of back and forth about what that range should be. Should it be a range? Should it be a specific number? But we decided a range would be the best. The next incentive, so the next waiver that would be allowed would be for building setbacks. So again, this is through the Zoning Board of Appeals, and it may be by special permit to waive the abutter setback requirement in all zoning districts up to 1/2 the minimum required setback in the zoning district, but in no case less than 5 feet. So we really wanted to maintain a setback. So we decided that, we're proposing that it can't go less than 5 feet. And again, I have an illustration that helps kind of show what potentially this could look like on a lot. And again, it is small on my PowerPoint, so if it's hard to see, I'd be happy to stop sharing my PowerPoint and go to the actual diagram if that's easier.
No, I think we're fine.
Okay, great. So this first top row here, the blue, or this, the lot here, the square represents a 40,000 square foot lot. And the blue represents a building, building coverage with no preservation. So basically what the size of the house you could build without using this incentive. So we used a few different types of homes potentially. So the first one, is here. It shows this kind of house with this little back garage, and then this one over here just shows, like a house. And then this next line here is shows the historic structures that would have to be preserved, and then this red area back in the back shows the additional building coverage that would be allowed. So it would show the additional amount of structure that you could build on a lot through this incentive. And again, we just give two specific examples. So you could have, additions in the back or on the side. So special permit process. We wanted to make sure we really outlined the special permit process so everyone was aware of what steps you would have to go through to actually get to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So prior to the initiation of the special permit procedures, the Historical Commission shall make a determination of eligibility for this incentive. We thought it was very important that the first step was the Historical Commission to determine if a property was eligible for this incentive. And then once that was done, then the applicant can go and apply for a special permit through the Zoning Board of Appeals. So findings required. When the applicant does get to the Zoning Board of Appeals, the special permit the special permits and the ZBA have to determine specific findings to see if the application would be approved. And so the ones on your screen right now that are bold, 4 through 12, are existing findings that we already have now. So I just wanted to put them in bold so you know that this is what we have now. But number 1, 2, and 3 are brand new findings that would be specifically for this bylaw. So number 1, the modifications of standards and requirements authorized are necessary to maintain the eligible historic building on site on which it was originally constructed, or to relocate to another site deemed appropriate by the special permit granting authority as advised by the Historical Commission. So the Zoning Board of Appeals would have to review this and make a finding on this. Number 2, that the proposed renovation, repair, adaptive reuse, or removal preserves to the maximum extent feasible the historical and architectural features of the building. And then 3, failure to grant the special permit is likely to result in inappropriate use or physical modification or pursuit of a demolition permit. So those were the 3 that we had added, and those come from other bylaws around the state that also have bylaws for dimensional variations. So conditions to be imposed. We want to make sure that there are specific conditions that go along with allowing the flexibility of these dimensional requirements. So the first one is that after a special permit is granted, if there are proposed alterations or changes to the historic structure, it has to go back to the Historical Commission for approval. If the commission determines that the proposed alterations are not minor, they have to go back to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a modification. So we wanted to make, very specific, very clear that if you change anything, you have to come back to us for review and approval. So another condition that we think is very important is that for each of these lots that apply for and receive a special permit for these incentives, they have to put a historic preservation restriction on their lot. So if we're giving you this flexibility in these dimensional requirements, the whole reason is to preserve historic structures. And so we want to make sure that your historic structure is preserved. So we put that specifically in there. And then again, after reading through it and talking about it, we really wanted to make sure that we, cover loopholes and things like that. And so we specifically wrote in here that in the event of any damage or loss or full demolition of the historic structure after this expansion, these variations have been allowed, if the structure is damaged or lost in its entirety, that these incentives will not apply to the new structure that's built. So if you lose your historic structure, you can't build a new house that has these dimensional flexibility. So we just wanted to point that out and make that very clear. And that is the extent of the bylaw. Thank you so much for having us, and we'd be happy to answer any questions, and we'd love to hear any comments or thoughts that you had on it.
Thank you, Ally. I'm going to make a couple comments. It looks like a couple of board members have some questions too.
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, Frank. I remember this going back, starting at this back in West Chatham, and then it was when we were looking at West Chatham overlay district for a neighborhood center and the historic building that was there, and you've taken it to another level, which is good, and it's been quite a long time going. You put a considerable amount of work in this, and it's pretty comprehensive, as you can see, and there's a number of issues that are there, especially not issues, a number of things that you considered, and I think it's important that what you've provided for the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I guess there's a tension here. You have historical properties, and then we have the tension of how are we going to make sure we can preserve them, especially on the properties that they're on. And this is an approach which looks at maybe granting some kind of waivers for setbacks and for coverage, and I get it. And that's all and good. You've done a little work with the planning board and a number of them. And all you're asking us is to move this thing forward so that what you really need to do is get a lot of public opinion on this, which is probably the next steps. But formal reviews by each of the boards, and then move ahead to get considerable public input. I think, personally, I'd want to get it out there to have people look at it, because it's an approach. And it's an approach to look at historical buildings, and we know they're disappearing. And every time, sometimes I hate to pick up the phone when Frank is calling me about something when it comes to the Historical Commission. But that's okay, I don't mind. Here's my question, and I think I know the answer, but you base the calculations on the square footage of the property that's there. There are a number of properties that are pre-existing non-conforming. You have 25,000 square foot properties in R60 zoning, in acre zoning. You're still using the property itself. It doesn't have to do with well, it would in some ways have pre-existing non-conforming, but the R60 requirement, that wouldn't come to play, would it? Or would it not?
So Peter, that's a great question. We get this question a lot. We've got it at the planning board level, we got it at the ZBA level, and so we've answered this question. And when we went out to different attorneys in town, they also asked this question as well. So we are proposing in the bylaw that it is for all zoning districts, so all lots with historic structures that met those definitions would be eligible. However, we do readily admit that there are lots in town that are pre-existing non-conforming, as you just stated. And there is already a mechanism to allow, dimensional variation through a special permit for pre-existing non-conforming lots. And so our best guess is that if, a lot was pre-existing non-conforming and they could use that avenue already, they would probably use that avenue, because our avenue allows for or requires a preservation restriction to be put on the historic structure. So although we do allow for any lot in town to be able to use this, we anticipate that the pre-existing non-conforming lots probably aren't going to go and use this our proposed bylaw.
Okay,
Does
thank you.
that-
Who is first, Dean? Or Shireen?
I just wanted to say this is really good work, and I know that we've been challenged by a lot of losses of historic homes in town, and Frank is, again, on the forefront and with his commission in working on some of this stuff. And so I'm really appreciative that the waiver incentives can provide some more flexibility that could maybe help in some of this process. So I look forward to hearing a little more from the public on this, and if we can move this forward to the town meeting, that would be great. Thanks.
Corey?
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Just a couple quick questions, because I mean, I too look forward to the public input component of this. That's the critical piece to this conversation. But my first question is under the purpose, where it says to encourage preservation of buildings. Is that 100% of the building, or like 51% or greater? What is the intent of that? Question one.
Yep, so that's a great question. I think that we envision it as the whole building would remain, but that is a question that we've received also from the Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals. So we're going to bring that back to the Historical Commission just to confirm what their thoughts were on that, but that's a great question.
Okay.
And we've heard that.
Ori,
Yep.
if I may, the Historical Commission usually doesn't slice and dice on a structure. This was built in 1920, this was built in 1930, this was built in 1820. That's a real slippery slope when we get into that. When we determine a structure to be historically significant, we certainly do recognize that potentially, for instance, if an owner comes in and he wants to take away an L which was built in 1950 versus the original structure, which was built in 1800. We do get into that discussion. But generally, when we determine a building to be historically significant, we use the entire structure and then work from there, rather than trying to upfront say, Part A is historically significant, Part B is not historically significant. You just can't do that. Thank you.
All right. The second question I have is, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of focus on loopholes and, how do you get through some of these bylaws? That's all, it's part of the process of, So if you have a property that receives the incentive and, everything moves forward, great, wonderful. X amount of years down the road, there's a severe storm, there's a fire, whatever, that damages the historic component of the property. At that point, to have it rebuilt, is it a by right situation, or is there any special review? I'm just kind of looking outside the box a little bit right now, but any thought on anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to get to it here. So I think that would fall under this section in the bottom of this slide here that, let's see, I just want to get to the right spot. In the event of damage, loss, or full demolition of the historic structure, such that the historic structure cannot be repaired, the owner may no longer take advantage of the lot coverage incentive or setback flexibility incentive allowed under this bylaw, and must bring the property into compliance with the underlying district's building coverage and setback requirements. So that's, if there's damage or loss or full demolition. But that's a good question, though. If, a small piece potentially was lost, how would we handle that? We do have a section that, if there's going to be a modification, it does, need to go back to the Historical Commission, and then it would ultimately have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. But that's something that we can think through further.
Yeah, that's a question that has come up, Corey. And we're kind of working on the process on how we actually do it, to ensure that we do allow the homeowner flexibility in restoring a property, by the same token still maintaining the historical integrity of the original structure.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I'm good.
Thank you. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ally and Frank, for the presentations, and as the liaison from the Select Board to this Historical Commission, I've been following this for the last couple of years now, I guess, including when you had live meetings, in-person meetings, and input from the Cape Cod Commission, and particularly Sarah Korjeff. I know you've looked at other towns. I think the town of Lexington was one that you looked at.
Yes.
So I certainly applaud the commission for working on this and bringing this forward. I think this is the second time you've been before us, but not with this level of specificity. I do have a few questions on the specifics. On the incentives, and this is in your slide about building coverage, you have a multiplier of 1.25, so it's basically a potential 25% increase. Where did that number come from? How did the commission arrive at that?
Yeah, so yep, thank you,
I'm sorry,
Frank.
go ahead, Ally.
No, thank you. So we were basically throwing around, a few different numbers. We, first started with a very specific number for all of the lots that you could, be allowed to have an increase in building coverage. But we felt as we, did potential variations of how that could occur on each lot, we thought for the smaller lots, it would be too much of an incentive to make the structures too big. So we wanted to find kind of a happy balance. So that's why we decided on this range. So as the lots got larger, the incentive for the building coverage got greater. And we really looked back at some of the old structures that were demolished and ones that weren't. And that's how we got to this 1.25. Again, this number we put it out there, but we're hopeful from a comment on the number. And, any suggestions that anyone might have would be welcome. I don't think there's a magic number, but we did try to be very thoughtful about the amount of coverage that we were allowing through this incentive, amount of additional coverage that we're allowing through this incentive.
The second question, I think you actually clarified this, but I think it bears repetition. The findings that are required for this special permit, you're basically superimposing 3 additional findings that have to be made by the zoning board among the ones that are already in place, such as on traffic or neighborhood, and the standard that the ZBA has to find that the use involved will not be detrimental to the established or future character of the neighborhood and the town. That's there now, and that's not going to change. That finding would still have to be made. It is a subjective finding, but I think, it will have to be made. The third is, if you have a comment,
sorry,
go ahead. If you have a comment, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's correct. Yes, the ones that are bold right now are the ones that are existing currently.
Okay, I have a couple of questions about the conditions to be imposed slide. That's the penultimate slide. So you say that the owner has to record in the Registry of Deeds an historic preservation restriction in the form approved by the special permit granting authority, that's the zoning board, and approved and endorsed by the select board. So let me stop at that. Are you talking about a standard form, or are you talking about a form in each particular case of an application?
Yeah, so we did have some discussion about this, and really, tried to think this part through. So we're hopeful that we would have a standard form that people would use. I do believe that Sarah Korjeff provided us with some examples of historic preservation restrictions. And so we would use, obviously approved by town council, but we would use a standard form that could be used, in all of these situations, so that it's very standardized and easy. Sorry, go ahead.
So it's not going to be the case under this iteration that each application is going to come before the select board for endorsement and approval. You're basically saying this is at some point, if this bylaw is adopted, the Historic Commission will propose a form present it to the ZBA, get their sign-off, and then bring it to the select board for our sign-off. That's how that's going to work.
Right, so it would still come to you, you know, because you would have, the select board would have to endorse it ultimately. So of course, you know, we'd want to run through the application with you and things like that for the sign off, but.
Thank you. So the rest of the sentence goes on, which shall at a minimum provide for conditions under which alterations, additions, or modifications may be made. So, again, there'll be a draft form. You mentioned something that Sarah Korjeff had proposed. When that comes to us for approval or endorsement, we'll have an opportunity to weigh in on whether we think that that these conditions for alterations, additions, or modifications are sufficient, or we could add to that in approving the form.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and we'll have to take that and think about that more. I don't have a specific answer at the moment.
Okay.
But we'll definitely think more about, and I'll talk to Frank, and I will talk to Sarah Korjeff as well to see what her recommendation would be and how that would work in reality. And so I that's a great point, and I'll take that back and make sure that we really make sure that that section works.
Okay.
Dean,
Well,
if I may,
yes, yes, Frank.
the whole issue of a preservation restriction, can be quite onerous. And we were careful to avoid this preservation restriction taking, through Mass Historic at the state level, which really would have been, very difficult. And so we were trying to find a way with Sarah Korjeff's assistance to find a way that we could, effectively preserve this preservation restriction, preserve the preservation. In other words, we're not going to let people have additional coverage or additional setbacks, above and beyond, the current bylaw without the town, the public, receiving some condition. In some ways, it's no different than what happens with CPA, community preservation funds. When public community preservation funds are used for historic preservations, technically there has to be a preservation restriction. Unfortunately, the town of Chatham hasn't done that in every case. But in this case, we want to be sure that there is a restriction, so we're not giving away something in terms of the ability to enlarge beyond and not having something in the future to ensure that that property stays the way that we allowed it to occur. But yeah, there's much more work to be done on that one.
Thank you, Frank. Well, I just will sum up by again saying I think the commission is being very proactive and basing the idea for this on your own experience and the challenges you've had in trying to save some historic structures in town. So I applaud you for that. I think it's a very thoughtfully prepared framework with some meaningful protections for the town. I suspect we're going to have some public comment tonight, but I wanted to just end by asking you, what is your plan going forward? I mean, obviously we all would like to see, and I think you want to see, ample public input before you finalize anything for formal submittal to us and the planning board and then town meeting. So what are your thoughts, or has that been scoped out yet?
Ally, why don't you start and then we'll finish it up.
Okay. All right, sounds good, Frank. So right now, so far, we've gone to the zoning board and planning board, and obviously the select board right now, to hear comments and clarifications and thoughts and, from each board, because obviously the zoning board of appeals is going to be the one that's administering this bylaw through the special permit process. So we really wanted to make sure that they felt comfortable with some of the wording that's in here and the process. So we did go to them and the planning board first, and we've gotten, lots of comment from both boards, which is great. A lot of support, but a lot of comments. And we're hopeful to take those comments and the comments we received tonight and bring them back to the historical commission so we can incorporate some of those thoughts and really think through more of some of the concerns that have been raised to us through those 3 meetings. And, we're very hopeful to have public comment during that period. We we think it's very important, obviously, to hear from the public on this. This is why we did bring it to the select board as well, because we thought it would get some more press. But I know that Frank has also done some outreach, I think, to the paper as well, but he can speak to that more.
Yes, I've done some personal outreach to attorneys and contractors and developers, you know, which really the first line of defense or offense, depending on how you look at it, you know, people involved in presenting historic properties to the Historical Commission for permission to demolish and or make significant modifications. And we've gotten some feedback, you know, needless to say, you know, the development community would like to see, you know, not 1.25, but maybe 6, you know, or something significantly more. But, you know, and I think a lot of that work, by the way, is that 1.2 factor came from discussions with David Nixon and the zoning board, based on a lot of, you know, experience of what we think we can and cannot allow. You know, this is brand new here. It may exist in one other place, I believe in Lexington, you know. So we are attempting to do something for the first time. And in terms of public, you know, this has been public at every one of the Historical Commission meetings and all the other meetings, and we really haven't had much feedback yet. But I believe, you know, we will get public feedback once we put it in a quotes final form and draft it and to say this is the bylaw. It's not simple. It's a difficult thing to explain, and unfortunately, that's with almost every zoning bylaw. So it's going to take a little bit of a lot more outreach and a little bit gentle persuasion to get our 2/3 majority at some future town meeting. But we're well aware we have a lot more work to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say that having watched some of the earlier iterations of this, I think the presentation tonight was fairly simple to understand. At least I was able to do that. Maybe I'm a little biased because I've seen some of it before. And this is the first time the broader public is seeing it. But because, as you point out, Frank, it's going to require a 2/3 vote at town meeting as a zoning bylaw change, I think it's going to be very important that even before this goes before the planning board, that the Historical Commission, you know, consider perhaps having a session devoted solely to this and public input, because it would be good to have that kind of public support going forward. So those are my comments, but thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dean. Anyone else? No, thank you, Ally, and thank you, Frank. I think what you've brought forward is certainly not only a good start, but you're going in the right direction, and I hope you have enough comments and recommendations for us to move ahead. You need anything else from us?
Thank you very much.
No, that's fine.
Thank you, Ally.
Thank you so much, everyone. And yes, I think we have enough comment, and we'll take it back to the commission and really evaluate everything. So thank you.
I get the sense of the board is to move it forward.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next is our Comcast cable TV negotiations. And Alex, welcome. You've been very patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, as you know, we are currently in negotiations with Comcast for the renewal license, which did expire on July 11th. So that is why I wanted to provide the board again, really with an update every single meeting that you have moving forward as we make progress with the negotiations. So in your packet, I've just provided an update, and I will read this, just the general gist for the public. We met on I provided an update on June 29th, and then the town and Comcast had negotiations on July 14th. And we have scheduled 2 more negotiations for August 4th and August 11th. So we're hoping to come to an agreement prior to the end of August. However, since the license did expire on July 11th, the town and Comcast have agreed to continue negotiations for a period of 120 days. And that 120 days does begin from the end of the license of July 11th, so that would be November 8th, 2021 would be the expiration of the 120 days, just for the board's information. So again, we're continuing to negotiate. We're still looking at the term. The town had requested 5 years. Comcast is proposing a 10-year term. The capital funding, the town had requested $500,000 over 5 years. Comcast had proposed the $244,400 over 10 years, which is the amount in the previous license. And we do believe that there will be some movement upward, but probably not to the level that the town has requested. And one of the more important things is the HD channels. The town had requested the 4 HD channels. Comcast proposed only standard definition channels. They've tentatively agreed to provide 1 HD channel in exchange for the town surrendering one of our SD channels, but we're still negotiating on this and hopeful to get at least 1, if not more, HD channels during the term of the license. So again, Comcast is continuing to negotiate, but those are the major points that I wanted to bring up to the board and make you aware of the extension of 120 days and request that the board vote to endorse that extension of the negotiating period. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, anything from the board? Shereen?
Yeah, Alex, just remind me, because, you know, so much is changing with, you know, companies like Comcast, because there's so many streaming services and whatnot going on. And we're looking for the 5-year contract. Do you know what other towns have gotten for contracts with Comcast? Have they, in their negotiations? I meant to email you this morning about that, but I can't remember what, whether it had been mentioned or not.
No, Comcast is currently negotiating 10-year contracts. There's been no other town that has requested, or maybe they have requested, but no other town has received a 5-year license agreement with Comcast.
Are we all on the same schedule as far as negotiating for contracts, or that we know of? I'm just wondering if there's power in the, you know, regional sort of voice.
We tried that when our contract was first up.
Okay.
Our last contract had been a consortium of towns, so we had joined with Harwich, Yarmouth, Chatham, and I believe one other town. I think it was Dennis. I came in at the end of that process. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out this time when we went to renew the contract, so we've gone it alone. But again, not all town licenses are up at this time, but quite a few of them are. So again, Comcast is going, and which is one of the reasons why it's been so hard to get negotiating sessions, because our contact at Comcast has been quite busy with these negotiations.
Okay, thanks.
Corey?
I just want to echo my support of Shereen's comments with this. The contract, this 10 years is a lifetime. And with the way the technology is changing, you know, 5 years can be a lifetime. But I just want to put on the record my support of trying to get as close to that 5-year window as possible, because I think 10 years, there's going to be so many changes, multiple changes within that window that may not benefit the town or put us behind a little bit. So we don't necessarily have to be the same as other towns. We dance to our own drum sometime. So the 5-year would be or close enough to that 5-year would be my preference. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Amen to that. You know, what is Comcast's rationale for wanting something longer than 5 years, given the rapidly changing state of the communications industry? What do they say?
I think what they're feeling is that because we have to go through the public ascertainment period, we have to put out the community survey to the town. So in another 2 years, we would be starting this process all over again. So I think that that's their rationale behind this. They just want to sort of wrap this up and move on, because they have other communities that they need to negotiate with that are on a different schedule. So I think it's they're looking for the longest term possible.
I mean, commonly you might want a long-term contract because you have to make a serious financial investment in infrastructure, and I don't know if that's the case. I know that they do upgrade their infrastructure from time to time and their equipment, but I look at the three issues here, and to me, the 5-year issue is probably more paramount than the other two. So I would try to press on that, and let's see where it goes. I certainly am okay with the additional 120 days, which means that everything stays in place. They're not going to pull the plug
Correct.
at the present time. So, Mr. Chair, I'll offer the motion that the board vote to accept the extension of negotiations with Comcast for a period of 120 days, as indicated in the presentation.
I'll second that.
You have a second? Shireen? Okay. I'll just make one comment. I agree. You know, I'd take one HD channel and try to move with the 5 years, looking at maybe to change that process a little bit. Maybe I know we have to go through a discussion, but go ahead, Dean, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I forgot to ask, is there any provision in the contract for early termination?
There is, I'd have to review it. I don't have that in front of me right now, but I think there is language in case either party defaults.
Yeah. Of course, it would depend on what the remedy is to the
Exactly right.
the other side, but it's one way of trying to deal with a longer-term contract. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dean. No, I would agree. And you know, the comments made over the years is 5 years is 5 years is when technology changes dramatically, and it hasn't changed that much in the last 15 years since the beginning of the iPhone. So anyway, we'll take a vote. Start with Corey this time.
Aye.
Dean? Aye. Shireen?
Aye.
And the chair says aye. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Okay, the last agenda item is appointments and reappointments. We have two commissions. One is the Cemetery Commission, the other is the Conservation Commission. And on the Cemetery Commission, we have one vacancy for the term to June 30th, 2024.
Mr. Chairman, may
Dean.
I have the privilege of making a comment for the record on one of the commissions? I'm not trying to influence anyone's vote, but in connection with one of the commissions, one of the applicants was not actually formally interviewed for that particular position. It came up as an afterthought.
And he
that
sent us
individual-
all an email.
Yes, he sent us an email,
Yeah,
but that's
go
not
ahead.
in the public domain, that particular
Okay.
email, and I think it's probably in the interest of transparency. I'd like to read a portion of that email.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So this is this is relative to the Cemetery Commission, and I did go back and watch the original interviews. The other two applicants were interviewed for that, and we asked questions. So this is from Mr. Burlingame. He did send in a second email to the Select Board, and I believe all members of the board got it, subsequent to his reappointment to the Historical Commission, and this is the sort of the central point of it, because it does give some indication of his background. I would further ask for your consideration to be appointed as a member of the Cemetery Commission. I have more than 30 years of experience in the management of cemeteries, having served as a volunteer board member and officer of a large private cemetery, and as the sole trustee of a fund established to maintain more than 60 small family cemeteries that had no funds of their own. In that role, I hired seasonal employees, purchased equipment, and supervised the care of these cemeteries, as well as investing the trust principles so as to provide adequate income for the fulfillment of the trust purposes. I filed both activity reports and financial records annually to the town manager and auditors of my hometown. My service as a volunteer in that role continued for 30 or more years. End of quote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, do I have nominees for the one vacancy for the term of June 30th, 2024?
I've got a nominee.
Whoever, I need
I nominate Stephen Burlingame, Mr. Chairman.
I second that.
a second. Do we have any other nominees? Hearing none, go ahead, Corey.
I'm in a pickle right now. This kind of stems from my earlier conversation, or earlier request. I'm going to nominate William Bystrom also.
Okay. And any second?
I'll second that.
I have a second. Okay, we'll have to poll. This is going to be interesting. we have an even number, but we'll see what happens.
I assume there are no other nominations, Mr. Chairman?
No.
I don't hear any.
No.
Okay. I'll hold this till later. Let me poll the board. Dean,
Stephen Burlingame.
Corey,
William Bystrom.
Shireen,
Stephen Burlingame.
Chair says William Bystrom.
What happens in the event of that?
We'll defer.
You can postpone it to the next meeting when there's a full board, but it's a tie vote, it doesn't carry.
Doesn't carry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question for Corey, and
Well,
could we increase the number for?
no, we can't. I looked into this because that was my first remedy, and it specifies it's a 3-member board.
Dean?
Is that in the town bylaw? Or is that,
Mass General Law?
it's in the general laws?
Yes.
Yep.
I'm surprised at that. So,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
So, yes, Dean.
I personally think we should defer this until we have a 5-person
I would
board.
agree.
It's possible one of the nominations could be withdrawn, but I don't plan on withdrawing the one that I nominated, so, and I suspect Mr. Metters is not going to withdraw the other one.
And just for transparency, one of my hesitations on voting in favor of one of the candidates is there was no formal interview, and that's my reluctance. You know, I'm hypersensitive in certain areas, so just putting it out there. That's
Okay.
on paper, he's very qualified, but we didn't specifically interview him for that position.
All right, we'll have to discuss that. So I would, do we have to vote to defer this?
I would just defer it.
I would just defer it through next time we meet. And let me check into Corey's comment. I think that's appropriate. Okay, I don't know. Anything else before we have a motion to adjourn?
Conservation Commission.
Pardon?
Conservation Commission.
Oh, how could I forget Conservation? My God, I'm going to be Conservation Commission. All right, we have one vacancy for an associate member to June 30th, 2022, and we have 2 applicants. Do I have a nominee? For Corey?
Why not? I will nominate William Doherty as an associate member until June 30th, 2024, unless sooner revoked or successor is appointed.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have any other nominees?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I nominate, I'm trying to hope I get this correct.
Roundhill.
Ronhild Bjerke, as an associate member to June 30th, 2022.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it just for.
Okay. Let me poll the board. I'll start with Shireen.
William Doherty.
Okay, Corey?
William Doherty.
Dean?
Ronhild Bjerke.
And the chair says William Doherty, so it's William Doherty. Thank you. And Roundell, thank you very much for your application. Okay, now, a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved?
Have a second.
A second.
Okay, Dean?
Aye.
Corey?
Aye.
Shireen?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Good night, Chatham, and thank you very much. Good night tonight.